Well, hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Paint Pod. My name is Sarah Hodgkins and I am a muralist working under the name Charlotte Designs and now, of course, a podcaster. The Paint Pod is where we dive into the vibrant world of art through chatting to amazing artists about their life and their work. Today, my guest is the wonderful Robyn Caley, who is an artist, an illustrator. I'm going to come on to that in a minute about the whole artist illustrator thing, who lives and works down the road from me in lovely Bedford. I have a great affection for Bedford. Welcome, Robyn, and thank you for coming onto the Paint Pod.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here. Yes, lovely to talk so locally as well.
Yeah, I know, it's lovely. I used to live in Bedford. I mean, we're talking 30 odd years ago now. So Bedford always has an affection in my heart. And of course, as you know, I've got a couple of murals there now. So it's just one of those places that I love visiting Bedford, walking on the river, going to the pubs. You know, it's just one of my favourite.
Absolutely lovely.
Have you always lived there?
Yes, more or less. I was born in Biggleswade, and then my parents moved. I know, so very local. My parents moved to Bedford when I was 2. And we lived in Queen's Park about 9, and then they moved to Kempston. So I pretty much grew up in Kempston, went to school in Kempston. Then I went away for university, and I never imagined I'd stay in Bedford. My parents aren't from Bedford, so I never felt like it was somewhere I needed to stay or anything. But I kind of ended up coming back, and somehow I'm still here. But it's so lovely. It's such a... You know, there's the river, there's the parks, but also the community is just wonderful. And so I'm very happy to be here. And, you know, I'm glad I've stayed and come back and, you know, made a home here. And now I live right in the town centre, so it's even nicer.
Oh, nice. And for me, it's one of those places that is trying really hard to embrace its creative subculture, of which there is quite a lot in Bedford, I always think.
Yeah.
It's doing a lot. Obviously, we've got Bedford Creative Arts, who we both know very well. There's a lot going on, and I think Bedford always seems to me like a place that's really trying to embrace that and become more, I don't know, trendy, I suppose, for want of a better word.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think you're absolutely right. Just to watch in the last few years, the art community, as I've sort of kind of come into it. I'm sure it was there before, but you know, I haven't been an artist for very long, not really, and so. You know, to see it all build up, to feel the community, see people working together, supporting each other, you know, and with things like Pride of Place Bedford going on and all these different projects, it's a great place to be. And you can see there's so many, you know, little local shops and things like that just for creative ideas and things. It's just great. You know, it's a lovely place. It's vibrant and it feels kind of up and coming, I think.
Definitely. Couldn't agree more. No, I love it. Absolutely love it. It'll always have a special place in my heart. Okay, so if I was going to describe your artwork, how would you do it? How would you describe it to our listeners who perhaps are not aware of what you do already?
That's a great question. Well, it's I think I'd say it's more of an illustrative style. So I tend to draw. The usual thing I draw is the front elevation, so the face of buildings. So that could be local architecture, any building really, personal houses or old buildings, new buildings. But I try and always focus on the front face, even if I have to adjust it a bit to force it round to look at the front, and you know, edit out the bins and things like that might be there and things, and you know, smarten them up a bit. But I use, so you know, just to go into the more details of it, I use a pencil sketch first to get the positioning right. Then I use a waterproof ink pen. And I always do that freehand, even if I've used a ruler in any of the planning. I'll go freehand into ink pen, so it looks more natural. And then I use watercolour to paint, so it's quite an illustrative result. But
I like that because it gives the buildings a kind of a warmth, and you know, buildings, especially modern buildings, can be a bit stark, lots of straight lines, and you know, I mean, architecture is varied, particularly in somewhere like Bedford. So for me, the style that you give them, it gives them a warmth, and it gives them a don't even know what the right word is really, like we connect with them.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'd like. Thank you, and it's kind of what I'd like to bring to it. Is that, and that's why I like doing the front. I feel like you can really connect with the front. It's like it's at the face of the building, and that's why I like to do that bit. I'm not so interested in drawing one from the side, even if that's a nice angle for various other reasons. You know, I like the front of it, and I like the connection you can have to it. But I also like, you know, rather than a photograph, you can add. You know, you can like you say, you can add warmth to it, brighten it up, show it at its best, you know.
It's like photoshopping for buildings.
It is, yeah. Olden day Photoshop.
So the first question I really wanted to ask you is why buildings? What attracts you to building?
That's a great question, and I almost would say I don't know, but I have pondered it for a long time, and I think there's actually quite a few reasons when I look into it. So I feel like I'm diving in the middle here a bit, but there are two houses from my childhood that really struck me. I loved these two houses. And one of them was my grandparents' house. They lived in North London in Hornsey, and they had this kind of 3-story terraced house. Stairs up to the front door, you know, just lovely, a little cellar, 3 random stairs in the upstairs hallway, higgledy-piggledy, kind of amazing but quite large house. And I just absolutely love that house. And that house is actually the house in my logo on Instagram. That's the house I drew it. I had to find it. They sold it when I was about 11, so I had to find it on Google Maps and drew it from that. And just that I loved that house. I haven't had a very strong connection to that house, but I just loved how it looked, all of it. And then the other one was my parents' friends. They had some very close friends who lived in Eastbourne.
Right.
And they had a gorgeous kind of Victorian house, ferns down the side and lovely planting. And it felt huge. I've been back since. It's not anywhere near as huge as I had in mind, but, you know, massive.
Memory really does mess
this enormous house, but also that was also really gorgeous, and for some reason they really not just the holidays but the houses themselves really stuck with me. But another kind of influence of buildings and a love of it was my dad was he'll probably be cross if I don't remember exactly what his job title was, but he did planning, development planner. So for a housing company, he had to lay out like the where the houses would be in a development. You know, so he put them on the roads. You know, so that kind of thing. So as children, we had these massive, great A0 bits of paper torn up, and on the back was our scrap paper. So there was always half a house or some funny shaped trees that were on the, you know, not that really, you know. So I always had houses in mind. We'd go and visit relatives via some kind of housing development somehow that was an hour out of the way, you know, to go and see it. So it was always there, and I think that had more of an influence than I realised.
Because those plans were actually quite beautiful in their own right.
Yeah, they definitely were. Yeah, the kind of I can remember especially the trees being a certain, you know, particular way of doing them, and all the different bits. They had a meaning, you know. They all very precise. And I think that that resonated with me more than I realised. I think.
No, very good. So did you grow up in a creative house? And obviously you've mentioned that your dad was a planning, and I've forgotten the job title already.
He'll be delighted. We'll go over
it. Was it a creative household? Did you have artistic influence from either immediate or extended family?
Yeah, a bit. Yeah. So they weren't. My parents weren't artists, but my I think they were creative. I'd say. You know, my mum. I have 3 pictures on my wall in the living room that my mum did as a young adult. I'd say, so probably like late teens or something, of my grandparents and her sister.
Nice.
Just lovely sketches. So they were always something I knew my mum had drawn. They used to be at my grandparents' house. I used to see them all the time, and now they're here. I think it was just always encouraged to do that kind of thing. Although, you know, more hobby style. But yeah, you know, we did. enjoy being creative and doing that kind of thing as children. Yeah.
And was that encouraged at school? How did your schooling develop your artistic love?
It's a good question, because I only studied art up to GCSE. So I did GCSE art, but I did well in that. I got an A in that, although I think that may have been partly because I looked at what you needed to do, and a lot of it was the supporting other. So you do a piece, but you had to show media. So I mean, I did the piece first, and then drew it in chalk as well, and it's smart, and then all this sort of so I think I helped myself on that one. But I do feel that it was a bit, I don't know if this is a bit harsh, almost a bit rudimentary, the teaching at school. We always did art. We did lots of things. We even at middle school we were lucky enough to have a pottery wheel there, so we could do potting. I think it must have been an art teacher who was particularly interested in that or something. But I don't remember getting, tuition on how to draw and things like that. I think it was my friend told me, instead of just drawing with one big line like you do when you're small, you can do a sketchy line, and it's actually comes out a lot better. So I don't remember that kind of, depth of tuition, but I did really enjoy art at school though.
Good. And do you remember influences at that age, artists that you perhaps used to enjoy looking at? Did you go to exhibitions and things when you
I mean, my mum certainly used to take us to London quite a lot to see different exhibitions and things. Good. And I've always preferred modern artists and abstract art and things like that. So things like Picasso and Matisse and things like that, Dali, all those. I love going to the Tate Modern and just having a look. And that's definitely I found that a lot more interesting, kind of the vibrance and the different take. And I know that isn't really what I'm doing. I'm doing something far more realistic. That still is what I have in my mind somehow.
Interesting. And so you say that you only studied art up to GCSE level. What did you do after that? How did things progress?
Well, I always felt that art, for one thing, it used to take me a very long time. So I didn't feel that I had time to do it at A level. It would have taken up too much time. I couldn't have concentrated on more than that, I don't think. But also I'd never felt that art could be something you could do as a career. It felt like I should be doing, because I was quite good at most things at that level. I was quite good at that. I was quite a good student. So it felt like I would be almost copping out if I did that. It sounds terrible, but that's how the impression was. I should be doing a serious thing. And I don't even know if, I don't know. I don't even think that's something my parents used to say. I don't know. It was almost like a self pressure that I should do something like academic, because that's sort of I don't know. It just felt that was judged better. I've no idea, to be honest, why.
Interesting.
So in the end I did chemistry at university. So
that's not what I was expecting to say.
I know. So rather than doing art A level, which I would have liked, I did ponder, but I knew it would take me too long. There's a couple of reasons. I really did enjoy, I was interested in forensic science and things like that. So I did science A levels, but there was also another reason why I did those, and that was because I hate writing essays. So I kind of went into I don't have to write essays route, and just carried on. So then my career it went a different way, but I've always felt creative. So shortly after I left home, I had a kind of a slightly different art career. I used to paint flower pots, like terracotta pots. So I'd buy them and then paint them, and picture frames I'd do the same to, and I did a few craft fairs like that, selling those. So that's how I started out, and then I used to do drawings and things like that at home, and carried on doing that.
So did you actually have a career in something sciencey.
Yeah, so what I'll say this, I can say the company because it's all in Bedford. I moved back after university, and all I knew was I didn't really want to work in a lab. I just didn't, that wasn't what was, I didn't find that particularly interesting. But there was a 6-month temporary contract for a lab technician at Unipath on Priory Business Park. So like where I mean, you could walk around Bedford and everyone was working there. You know, it was just a big company. So I started there working with clear blue pregnancy tests, which so that was where I started. Then the contract was made permanent, and then I moved. I was at the company for 20 years. I moved. I know. So I moved into technical support, so training the care line, the clear blue care line, the people who answer the phones if you phone up, with this kind of technical background of how the tests work and the science behind it. And that, while I was doing that, I always had these kind of urges every few weeks of really feeling I wanted to be creative and drawing and doing things at home. And then after about 6 years, I moved into a marketing, a product management role, a kind of marketing type role. And that was a creative role, and not in the same way, but it took...
No, but it is creative.
Yeah, it took my creative... So then I stopped drawing and things because it answered my creative needs, I suppose, for quite a long time. So I had this kind of massive gap in doing anything artistic apart from, you know, being a bit creative at work. So it was quite interesting.
Wow, that's really interesting. And I didn't know any of this. So how do you, looking back now from where you are, how do you think that well, I suppose almost two separate stints, one in more of a scientific role and one in a marketing role. How do you think that has helped you and influenced you and helped to bring you to where you are now?
That is a really good question. I think it's... I feel as though it's given me a personal confidence in being able, because I was, you know, a lot of the things I was doing was training. I wasn't a self-confident person. At first, I found that very challenging. But doing it so much gave me, you know, I was doing a lot of in-person training or because it was several countries, I would be doing, you know, like a kind of a WebEx type training as well. And I got a lot more confident about being able to speak in front of people and stand up and talk about things. But yeah, I think it gave me a confidence that otherwise I don't think I'd have necessarily got. So that, I think that's really important there.
No, nice. And it's interesting, you know, obviously having conducted a few of these conversations now, how often people have done something that's quite, you know, far removed from art prior to where we are now, and have felt that has been, you know, really important in developing them as an artist and their art practice.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's interesting, isn't it? And I think if I thought about it more, I haven't thought about that before. So it's interesting that you said that. I think I'll ponder that now.
Yeah.
I think I feel like I'm going to come up with more things. Like, actually, that was really influential. Yeah. That really kind of helped me to think about things. I mean, we certainly did used to have to design with an agency, but design brochures and packaging and things like that. So that made me think about colour, that made me think about presentation. We were always doing presentations, and, you know, for training, you have to make it appealing and so that people can follow it. And I think all of that does impact what you do as an artist.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
Oh, so it's really, I'm learning something myself here.
Now, I read your story about how you kind of made the leap to being an artist, and I'm not going to tell it. I'm going to get you to tell it. That's a lovely story. But I want to hear it in your words.
Okay. Well, it's quite funny. I mean, I probably put more than you've been able to read into it, but I don't know about you, but I am the sort of person who sometimes buys things thinking this will probably make a great present for someone. And then I give them something else, and I don't know. Then I've got a thing.
That's what you do, Robyn.
Yeah.
You steal it.
I steal it. Yeah. Well, this was one that it was something I bought, and I then found a year or two later, thinking, "Gosh, I haven't given this to anyone. I don't even know who to give it to." And it was a book that is called "Draw Every Day, Draw Every Way." and it's a book that you draw in. It's a year of individual prompts for drawings it goes through 12 different kind of subjects and 12 different media.
Okay.
And I had a friend, well, it was my best friend at school, who we used to do art together anyway, and we used to do all these things together. And I thought, she might like this, so I bought another copy and I gave it to her, and I said, no pressure, but let's draw every day for a year. And we did.
Quite a commitment.
I know, and we kind of thought, oh, and then we started on the 1st of January 2019.
Yeah.
And the first chapter was horrendous. It was felt tip pen, and I was following the book to the letter, so I wasn't doing any other sketching. And it was a few days before I thought, why don't I actually use a reference image? Because I'm awful at drawing from my imagination. It's like I can't. As soon as I try and look at an image in my mind, it fades away. So I need to be, I need to look at a picture. But we did it. We did it through it. It went through felt tip, pencil, pen.
Wow.
So that helped me to realise what it was I liked using. And I'd never thought of using pen and watercolour until I was doing that book. It's just these funny things that you realise. And halfway through, I decided to be brave enough to start putting it on Instagram. And it turned out that a few people were doing the book, and it didn't matter, because that you can hashtag the name of the picture.
Yes, of course.
Unless it's something really common, then you can see the people who've been doing it. And so people were so supportive, and nice comments, and it was all ranges of people. Some people's stuff was brilliant, and some of us were clearly just starting out. And I found that it just helps you keep going. And at the end of that year, we decided to do our own prompts and just carry on and carry on for another year. And just coming up with some monthly things to do. So that's how it started. That's how getting into it.
Such a lovely story, isn't it? I did an art foundation, and Andrew, who I've just spoken to, he also did an art foundation. And what you're describing is almost a self-done art foundation. You're getting a chance to have a go at lots of different things, find what resonates, what doesn't, and then be able to focus on that thing that's working for you.
Yeah, it was exactly like that. I mean, if you said you've got to do on this course, you are going to be doing 365 drawings, that would be so overwhelming.
Exactly.
I think I can't do that. But I did do it, and it was, you didn't need to spend very long on it. And it was very interesting. And it certainly taught me a lot of different things about what I liked drawing, what I really didn't. I mean, it turns out I probably won't be using homemade ink stamps out of carrot anytime soon.
Wow.
I know. So carrying on with that. And I mean, I am lucky because I am a bit of a procrastinator. I kind of, last minute, like the pressure at the end is what gets me through. But my friend is very much if it needs to be done, I'll do it. She's very focused. And so that kept me going as well. I don't know if I would have finished it if I did it on my own. But the fact that she was doing it as well, that kept both of us going. I think probably kept each other going.
So that was you into 2020, which of course, as we all know, famously was COVID.
Yes.
So how did COVID help, not help? How did that progress during the course of 2020 when you were doing these sort of self-made?
Well, that was quite good actually. So obviously it was different. I think the COVID experience, especially in the lockdowns, was incredibly different for each individual person, depending on what they had to do, whether they could not work, had to work, how many children they had to teach, and this kind of thing. So during that time, my daughter was that was the year she was 4/5. So in reception, she started reception towards the end of 2020.
Wow.
So she was at home, but I had recently been made redundant from the job I was working for because they were moving everything to the US, and I didn't want to move there. So that ended. But because I'd been there a long time, I had the opportunity to take a bit of time off.
Okay.
While my daughter was young, so that helped. So that gave me a bit more time, even with lockdowns and things, to carry on drawing. But I think it's a funny thing that the main lockdown thing that influenced it was actually the Quarry Theatre just around the corner. So the Quarry Theatre in Bedford, I can't remember when it was, but probably towards the end of 2020 maybe, or early 21. They end of 2020 they decided to do a lockdown exhibition, and they just asked if anybody, artists or non-artists, who had just started drawing or been drawing during lockdown, to submit 2 or 3 pieces that they would exhibit. And I don't know how I found out about it, but I thought, okay, I'm going to try it. So I messaged them, showed them, and they said they would. So I had 3 pictures. One of them, I think 1 or 2 of them were a house that I'd drawn. And I put them up there. And so I think that kick-started me, that it could actually be something on a wall. This isn't just something I'm doing as a hobby. It could be something that, in private, it could be something that people have.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that was my first thought about that.
How do you think being self-taught has influenced your practice? And how do you, because going on from that, how do you continue to improve as a result? Because as artists, we are continually looking to improve how we work and what we produce. How do those 2 things work together?
That's a great question. I think individually, I think just practicing and regularly drawing, even though everyone says practice makes perfect, it really is true. And I've realised that the difference between the beginning of that book and the end of that book, 365 drawings later, is big, but the difference between then and now is bigger.
Yes.
It just keep improving. But I think,
and I can see that on your Instagram, funnily
enough. Lovely.
Right back as far as I can.
And you can see I've improved maybe the like the pens I've used, and got a broader range of better paint and things like that. But also the actual drawing itself, I feel. I surprised myself on one occasion because I've joined an urban sketching group. My natural instinct is to be inside. I always find myself inside, even on the loveliest day. I've gone inside. So it's not somewhere I usually draw inside. But I feel like it's a good challenge to do. So I suppose that links into what you've said. Actually, being self-taught means you have to find ways to learn. And so going to this urban sketching group, not only am I with other people who are doing that and can share tips, but it's good practice because it's something that's a little bit outside of my comfort zone. But what I've learned from that is I can sit in front of a pub or something and draw it without the ruler and everything that I usually use at home, and it still looks okay because I feel like I've learned quite a lot about the architecture, about what makes the drawing look better, about how things, even if they don't look it, you can see if they should be symmetrical, so you can actually draw them symmetrical, and to someone's eye then that looks more like the building than it would do if you didn't, if you drew it how you saw it. So I think practice, and I've also found that Instagram has been a great source of learning. So I started to follow people who did things that I wanted to do and did things that I liked. And a lot of people, share videos of how they do things and what they're doing, and seeing that it's inspirational. And sometimes you see, that's how you do that. I can try that. And so there's a few people I find very inspiring on Instagram, and I follow a lot of people who do the same thing, so that, we all follow each other, I think, so you can learn from what they're doing. So I don't know if that really ties into being self-taught, but I think it's a way of learning that isn't in an institution or something.
No, that's really interesting. Because I think, as I say, and I'm the same, I did a project, this is 12 years ago now, where I had to paint 30 murals in 3 months.
Oh, wow.
And I could see the difference between the first one and the last one. And to me, there was a massive difference from the last one. When you are, I use the word forced loosely, to paint a lot and do it, whether it's every day, every week, whatever it is, you do see a difference. It's there, it's marked. And you do then try to find other influences, whether that be on Instagram or YouTube. There are some great YouTube people out there as well who also.
That's true. Yeah, there's great tutorials you can follow as well.
Absolutely. And I have to say, I still look at some of those sometimes. I think I just fancy trying something different today, and just going on and seeing how other people do it. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. And sometimes I've tried to do those as well, and then you can draw what they're like, things like painting clouds or something, and I've tried to do that, and the initial painting looks great, and then I try and draw other clouds like that. No, you can draw those clouds. Yeah.
I want to touch a little bit now on the commercial side of what you do. So obviously we've talked about Instagram, and you are fantastic on Instagram. You're one of those people that once I'd found you, I was like, oh, this is really good. You also have your Etsy shop, which I believe you started in 2021. So that's been going for 3 years or so now. How do you go about finding your customers? What do you do? Because you take commissions as well. How do you go out and find your customers?
Well, that's interesting, because starting out, so how it started, so the first customers I had was after the lockdown exhibition that I mentioned earlier. I thought, okay, maybe I can do this. I'd seen some house portrait drawings that people do, and I'm from a different area, so I didn't feel like I was encroaching on what they were doing. I thought I'd try it. And so on Facebook, I just put a message out to my friends saying, would anyone like me, you know, I think I like maybe £20 or something. Would anybody like me to draw an A5, so a small drawing of their house, and, you know, see what happens. And I ended up doing 10.
Wow.
Yeah, so people were just like, oh yeah, that sounds really good. So I had some, you know, a couple of people had 2 for their one for their parents or something. And, you know, those are the ones I look back on at the beginning of my Instagram feed that, oh, you can see I've improved since then. But it was a great start, and it gave me the confidence to think, okay, maybe I can try and join a local craft market, you know, and maybe I should start an Etsy shop. So those things I did. I joined a makers market that I don't think runs anymore in Bedford, and actually got quite nice feedback and people buying things and a few more commissions. And I started up the Etsy shop, which I would say was significantly less useful in terms of generating sales. I haven't sold much on Etsy, and in fact I haven't even put many things recently on Etsy. So much of it, and I suppose it's because my subject matter is so local. You know, all of my pictures, nearly all of them are Bedford. It's word of mouth, and it's just built kind of organically, I think. So we had the first Bedford flea of the year yesterday, and that was brilliant. It was for me, it was the best one yet. People are coming and saying hello, who I've only ever met at the flea, and they've come back and say hello, or I've just seen your art somewhere else. I can tell it's you, and it's just an incredible feeling that I never imagined. You know, it almost feels, I definitely feel like imposter syndrome at that point of like, you know, this, I don't know, it's a funny feeling, but it's definitely organic, and it's far better in person. Yes. But once people have had commissions for their friends, I've had people say, oh, I've seen you've done that, I'd like you to do one for me. And repeat customers in that way as well. So far more organic and in person, I've found, than online.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, I started an Etsy shop. Oh, crikey, it must be 10, 12 years ago now. And I just couldn't get it. I'll be honest. I just found it too complicated. I was like, I can't. This is just, I was stressing so much about that. I was not really focusing on my artwork. So, gone.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, mine's there, and occasionally, I mean, I've probably had 20 sales in that time altogether. There's some of my older prints are on there, and an option to choose a commission. But that just, and they take, you know, doing a commission as well. I feel as though the commission that Etsy takes is way too much for that.
Right.
You know, if I can sell it for that much, I'm already selling things for, you know, I wouldn't be earning minimum wage if I did it by hour. So why am I giving then half the money to Etsy? I find it's a bit frustrating. I mean, I know it works for some people, but I just think, you have to find, it's worth a try, but I think you have to find the thing that suits you. And for me, it's markets and talking to people a lot more.
So are you predominantly commission based now?
No, well, no, I wouldn't say. I mean, I am. I've always got several commissions in hand, which I never imagined would happen. So at first I thought, how, at first I didn't, of course, and there'd be one or two every 6 months, and think, how is this going to build up? But now I feel as though I've started to establish, so people have started to know what I do, and so then people do come to me, or they bear me in mind and come back later when they want something. So there's always some commissions ongoing, but the fairs are great for selling prints and things, and I do sometimes advertise on local, like We Are Bedford or Castle Residents Association or that kind of thing on Facebook, that then generate people to contact me and come to me. So I also have prints in a few shops in Bedford, so that's quite nice. Okay. So that helps as well.
So, I mean, there'd be nothing stopping you from doing that further afield, I guess. I mean, I don't know.
No, the only thing stopping me is I'm really inspired by the buildings in Bedford, and there's just this never-ending list of ones to draw, and the time to draw enough buildings in another area to branch to that area. That's all that's stopping me. I need to, you need to have the buildings that are local for people to want them, I think, mostly, unless they're very famous. That people sometimes buy one that they know no idea what it is, but usually there's a lovely story to be told. So the markets are great because there's people who met in that pub, or one chap bought a print of the Georgian dragon because one of the windows was his bedroom in the 80s when his parents moved in. This is lovely. So the connection people have with it is much more because it's local. So to branch out, I'd need to spend a lot of time drawing another area, which I could do, but haven't yet.
I think it's interesting, and what I've noticed you doing more of late is almost productizing what you do. So your wedding pictures, yes. Starting to do, and I just think what you're doing there is you're kind of showing people how they can use your art to produce, something beautiful. And for me, it's not just weddings either. You could do them for special birthdays. People have houses that they were brought up in, where they moved to, they went for honeymoon and all these sorts of things. Tell me a little bit about how those came about, because they really are quite beautiful.
Thank you. Well, it's interesting you say that, because it was from thinking about what else can I do with these. What can I show people I can do? What people like to have in terms of having a building in their house? So the wedding story one, I'd seen other people do something like that, where they do a venue and a reception thing or something like that. But the way I decided to do it, because I wanted it to be, I don't like feeling like I'm copying for a start. I don't want to look at what other people are doing. I'll do that. I don't think that's on, really. I think that's a bit of a sort of a strange way to go about it. You can be inspired, but I don't think you should be the same. But I also wanted to add a bit more of a kind of a feel to the whole, an overall feel to the picture. So instead, I decided to try out doing a wedding story, so it looks as if all the places are next to each other. It's kind of one long thin picture, all linked by trees and things like that. So the first one I did was it was the couple's house, and I looked at the trees in the garden and things like that. So I drew that. I mean, the house was tiny on this big piece of paper because they wanted their house, their wedding venue, their reception venue, and their honeymoon venue. And their honeymoon involved the Leaning Tower of Pisa, which is fair to say it's quite a lot bigger than a house. So I had to scale it. It was quite hard to put together, but I really enjoyed it because you had to try to look realistic, but adjust the scale so you haven't got a dot of a house and a huge tower, and so kind of make a bit smaller, and then I used the trees and things that were around each building to link. So I put
To
them
link it
between the
together.
buildings and link them together. So it's kind of a story as if you were there and you can see the whole thing at once. And yeah, I like doing that. And I think that's a lovely different thing to have. But that's something I do as an original painting. So that's something I do not based on anything else I'd done. It just would be,
Right.
this is how it is. But in terms of sort of utilising the drawings I've already done, I've started doing pub crawls as well. So I've done enough pubs in Bedford that you can have a pub crawl. So if I've drawn it and it's a print, I can make it into a series on a piece of paper with like, these are the pubs we always go to, or these are our 3 top pubs, or yeah, this was our night out.
Great idea.
So, yeah, they've been quite popular. That's quite a funny thing to do with them, and it just makes it a bit more interesting and quite a bit more personal for people.
And you know what? For me, you're doing all the things that artists should be doing. You know, you are finding a market for what it is and for what you do. And just like you are very, have an affection for buildings, we all know that we all have affections for different buildings in our lives, whether, as I say, it's somewhere we've lived or got married or proposed to or whatever it happens to be. We all have affections for different buildings. So you're almost just playing to that and taking it to the next level. And I think that's fantastic.
But it's very interesting you say that, because for such a long time of being a creative person and not really knowing what I wanted to do, it's hard to put this into words, but the main sticking block for me was knowing what to draw. I never found what to draw. I didn't want to, I found things almost uninspiring, like I'm not inspired by almost everything I can think of to draw somehow. It was really strange. Like I felt I'm drawing just for the sake of it. I think it felt like just for the sake of it. Like if I draw a still life, I'm just, it's not resonating with me. I'm just drawing it, like, it was so strange. That was what I couldn't think. What is it? And maybe I focused it, and I think I focused on it. Probably it's true to say I focused on it too much from what would people like to see, rather than what would I just like to draw. And it was all that practice that I did that made me realise I do really enjoy drawing houses, and I actually have lots of love for drawing them. And it was, I think, finding what I wanted to draw was an absolute breakthrough almost. That set me up to be actually able to do something commercial with it and to enjoy doing it and turn it into a real thing, more than anything, I think.
And I think there's just so much potential. You know, I look at your work and my brain's going, absolutely do, laddie, with just ideas and things that you could do with them.
That's what mine always does.
I think there is so much potential in what you do, and for the reasons we've just been talking about, people's affinity to places, lots of different reasons. So that's fantastic. I want to talk now more about the practical side of creating your artwork. I know we touched at the beginning about your waterproof pens and then your watercolours. Talk me through the process. Do you take photographs? Do you do sketches? How do you actually work through a piece?
So I predominantly work from photographs. There are a few things I've done where I've gone out and done a sketch, but for commissions I've not done that. That would be something, it's far looser if I go and do that, and it's less likely to be exactly the right proportions and things like that, because I'm just drawing it. So usually I'll have a photograph. I try and get a photograph that's as straight, square onto the building as I can from a distance, so that you get the right proportions. I'll tweak it on, I literally just use an iPhone. I'll edit the photo to stretch it a little bit, but I've started to get a real eye for if it's overstretched. Those windows have gone tall, or something. That can't be right. But to make it square, to get the proportions right, and I'll actually do quite a few measurements from that usually, so it's very precise to begin with. In particular, to make sure it's central to the page. So if you're doing something that isn't going to be just a print, you want it to be an original painting, then it needs to be, it needs to actually be over in the corner or something, or coming off slightly. So I'll do that. I'll square it up. I'll square it up on the page and draw it in pencil, using a ruler. Not all of it, but draw the main parts of it in pencil with a ruler, to make sure it's precise and square. And then I'll have a look at that. So that during that time, though, I will be adjusting the building from the photo. So I think I alluded to it earlier. If it's supposed to be symmetrical, I'll make sure it is. I'll adjust the photo, so it's not something I could trace or something like that, because it isn't the same thing. Even though it's being measured, it's adjusted so it looks right at the end. And when I've done that, so then that the ruler goes away after that. That's it. So then I move on to a very fine black liner to draw it in pen, and that's when I'll do things like adding the detail, like the bricks and things like that to it. And when I finish that, I will use watercolor paint. But it's quite interesting, because I decided that my favourite part of how the drawing is having a smooth line. So I don't use watercolor paper. I use Bristol board, which is a flat, shiny, well, not really shiny, but a very, very flat, smooth. Thin board. I just, after trying out different things, I found that that's what I preferred. So watercolor paper, because of its texture, doesn't allow the pen to be as smooth. I didn't find anyway, in the style I draw, which means I do feel like I'm not accessing all of the attributes of watercolor paint, because I can't use the flow of the paper. It doesn't do that. So it's much more of a colouring in kind of experience.
I think you're doing yourself down here a little bit, but okay.
Yeah, it kind of is, though, because it's not, I'm kind of, the flow of the paint is something I've almost chosen to restrict by using the wrong paper for watercolour. But the effect of it is something that I quite like, so that's why I carried on with it. So that's how I do it.
So now you've said that, I am thinking you are using two very difficult mediums there. If you make a mistake with a permanent marker, there's nothing you can do about it. You have to start again. And watercolour is famously extremely difficult. You can't cover up. If I make a mistake when I'm painting a mural, I can paint over it. You can't do that. You have chosen a very, very difficult way of producing your art. How?
I know mistakes. I've had some absolute horrors, actually. The worst one I think I did was a commission for somebody. It was a friend of mine, and it was her dad's pub. And I had nearly finished. I was literally, I will say, just a slight aside here, my favourite thing to do on the pictures is when you add the shadows, because it's such a flat thing, and then you just put the shadows in, and it just, it is. So that's all I had to do left, and I got a small piece of green paint on my hand, smudged margin, and there was nothing I could do. It was it wouldn't have been covered by a mount. It was right in the white part of the painting, and because it's not watercolor paper, you can't lift it off. I tried, and it made it much worse. So I had to start again. I had to just do that one again. That was the worst. Horrendous. But I will say that if there's a mistake within the painting, where sometimes I'll draw a line and think, I wanted something in front of that, I should have drawn that line. Actually, there's a lot to be said from a white marker. You can use that. I do use that anyway to add some highlights sometimes, and it paints over. So you can add a highlight in the white marker and then paint over it and have a pale yellow or something like that.
Oh, okay.
And that hides some things, so I can get away with a few things like that. But otherwise, disaster strikes.
Oh God! I was going to say you must struggle. I would be just.
Oh, it was awful.
Like you say, you get a little bit of paint on your, and you don't realise it's there, and then that's it. It's just all over the place. It's absolutely. Well, I take my hat off to you, because it's such a beautiful, warm way of creating your art. And one of the other questions I had about the way that you create is buildings by definition are, relatively bland in their colour palettes, and yet your paintings have a beautiful warmth and vibrancy to them. How do you use colour to create that warmth when a lot of the time you've got some very bland colours, unless you're in car parks where people have come along and painted on first?
Put some crazy thing on the side. Yeah. I will have to tell you the story about that in a minute as well, because I've now painted that 3 times. But
how do you do that? How do you use colour to because that takes some skill.
Well, what I tend to do is finding different ways. I find if you you can't use one coat. If you try and do it in a thick, kind of a dense watercolour, one coat, it doesn't seem to work. So I paint in actually very dilute layers.
Okay.
So, for example, if I'm doing the brickwork of a building, there's so many gorgeous Victorian buildings around here, and I'm always happy if it's a red brick building because you can add so many tones. But unless it's a brand new house, they have a whole host of colours in the brickwork.
Absolutely.
So I will do a pale wash of what the background colour looks like, and they're all different. So some are more orange, some are much more terracotta. So I'll try and get a kind of background colour that's a kind of an approximation of that. And then I will probably do several coats of that till it builds up, maybe adjusting the colour to make sure it looks kind of about right. And then I'll use several different colours to go over some of the bricks. So it gives it a bit more character, it brings it forward, and that's where the warmth comes in, I think, because you can really build that tone in some places. So it's definitely not done all in one go. Yeah. And all of it's like that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I know you, like I say, we've talked about there are buildings with colour, especially with pubs, you get things like hanging baskets and stuff like that. So that does bring a bit of warmth, and you're very good at adding trees and foliage and things to your painting.
It's always a big thing. I think if I can put some foliage in there, even a hanging basket, it lifts it a lot. So I think a lesson there for people who rip all the greenery out of their houses. It makes a huge difference if there's something there to. If it makes a difference in a painting, it makes a difference in real life. So
absolutely, softens corners. Buildings by definition tend to be straight lines, and if you can add some foliage, it just softens those straight lines a bit.
Absolutely.
So what are you going to tell me about Muriel then?
Well, so and this is something we haven't touched on actually, but my absolute preferred architectural style is kind of brutalist type stuff. So it doesn't, you'd never guess, because that isn't really, that's not the side of things. I do love all the things I draw. I do love them, but my preference is I really like brutalist architecture, like 60s flat roof flats, things like that. So I've got some things in mind that I haven't gone to yet, but this is what I'm. But so I decided to do, and because Gemma as well from the Arc, and I'm good friends with Gemma. I thought that would make a really good one for the Women's Day event at Hurd. So Hurd, down on St Cuthbert Street, have done for the last few years a really great International Women's Day event where they've not only had female DJs and female music playing, but they've invited female artists to put pictures up in there, and not for any cost. It's just they're so lovely. It's just literally put it up. It will make our pub look nice and focus, and people can see what you're doing. It's just a lovely thing. It's a great thing. So that I think the second year of doing that, I decided to do female-focused buildings, and one of them was the Arc, because Gemma runs it, and I thought, well, I really like the car park, even though most people don't. So I'm drawing and I can see it from my house. I live from the back of my house, and I've got Lurk View, Lurk Street car park. So I drew, because the Arc is so long and thin, it fitted nicely with the entire car park above it. So 2 weeks later, I noticed someone up a cherry picker painted a giant octopus on the side, which is absolutely gorgeous. It's just lovely. It's just absolutely fabulous.
Thank you. I get so much good feedback on it.
I'm not surprised. It's just wonderful. The fact that you painted it with huge gaps in it as well is just amazing because it still
I
looked.
didn't have a lot of choice.
No, I know. I know. So I thought that 2 weeks later, I'm going to have to obviously add the octopus. So on that occasion, I used acrylic paint to add it.
Okay.
Almost like what you did on the building. I had to use paint to go over the picture I'd already done. So I thought, I don't want to draw it again. So, but I've already got the strong lines underneath it. So I used acrylic paint, which painted right over those to add the octopus. And then now that Gemma's moved into taken over the gallery, and it's now You for Coffee, and it was another Women's Day event at Herd, I thought, well, I'll do the new bit. I've done just a section of it, just the You for Coffee part and a piece. But there was Muriel the octopus, and that time she's in watercolour because I did it with the painting. But yeah, so it's inspired me to paint
lovely to hear. And that is, of course, really how I found you, because you tagged me on your picture on Instagram. And it was just this coming together of these three creative women, yourself, Gemma Crawley, and me. And it was just, it was just like this sort of perfect.
It was brilliant, yeah. And it was all about Women's Day at the time as well. And I just thought, well, I can't not highlight the person who actually put the octopus on there in the first place. This is really important. So no, it was great, and it's lovely to talk to you now after all this time.
Definitely. And it was so lovely. And I remember seeing, I got almost as much joy from seeing your illustration of my mural as I did actually painting the mural in the first place. It was just lovely to see your interpretation of it. So
it's such a lovely mural.
it was fantastic. It was just talk to me a little bit about, I know you've got a young family, you've mentioned your daughter already. How do you juggle your art practice with being a mum? Because I've been there, I've done that, it's not easy. And any sort of help that you can give perhaps other artists who are going through a similar thing would be really useful.
Well, that's a really good question, and it's not easy. So I've tried to, in terms of kind of work-life balance, I've tried to angle my working around my daughter. She's 8 now, and I really wanted to be there to take her to and from school, take her to clubs, this kind of thing. So my working time is between it. So she does go to an after-school club at the moment once a week, and she's got one other club that she stays at school for. Okay. Other than that, my working time is basically after I've dropped her off till before I picked her up. So it's very much truncated. And if I'm doing also I do also sometimes do consultancy. So when I'm doing that kind of thing, then that takes up time too. But in terms of creative time, my natural instinct would be to just start in the afternoon probably and just carry on all evening, something like that, just carry on and on. But that's absolutely impossible. So I have to start when I get home from school and finish early. But as she's got older, I've been able to get her involved a little bit. So during lockdown, for example, we watched some Bob Ross on TV.
Love Bob Ross.
I know. I mean, how inspirational to watch Bob. And we did together draw one of his paintings. And she was
fantastic.
5 and just did a lovely rendition. I got her some paint and got her involved in that. And then we did, I think, the author and illustrator Rob Biddulph did some draw with Rob things. I don't know if you know, he writes lovely kind of rhyming children's books. Yeah. And he put lots of videos up of how to draw them. So we did some of them. And most recently on the last Urban Sketch, which was at the Regatta on Saturday, we went down there and she came along, and for 2 hours she drew boats and dogs, people's dogs that she was walking with a friend of hers. So I think
artists there, I think.
Yeah, I think her seeing me do this kind of thing makes her more creative. So fitting it in isn't so easy, but seeing her inspired by it is really rewarding. So that makes it really lovely.
And how do you deal with things like school holidays? Because they're the things that I use.
With difficulty, I think. I'll try and do something. I mean, I think there's something to be said for play dates. So whether she goes to somebody else's house or she has a friend round, if she's got a friend round, because I've only got one child, so she's by herself, so I have to be with her she's involved in whatever she's doing. But if she has a friend round, they can play, and then I can get on with things. So that works. And then I maybe move to doing things a bit more late in the evening after she's gone to bed as well.
Yeah, of course.
But now, for some reason, as I'm getting older, that's more difficult to not fall asleep during. But yeah, so it's a juggling act, but it's okay. It's worth it.
It's something I get asked about quite a lot, because I started Charlotte Designs literally a year after my son was born.
Oh, wow.
So I know. Started it with a 1-year-old. It seemed like a good idea at the time. What can I say? But it's enabled me to, as you've just said, go to all the concerts, go to all the sports days and the assemblies, to drop them off and pick them up most days. And now they're adults and really don't want to be anywhere near mine. I have a thriving business left. And so it is difficult when you're going through it, but I think it's worth it. I really do think it's worth it. And I think what you end up with is worth the juggling heartache that we all have to go through, particularly in the delightful long summer holidays, which really do need to be addressed in some way.
They're lengthy.
And it doesn't do anybody any good, I don't think.
No, I think it's very difficult, isn't it? It's difficult to juggle. And now, the majority of people are working. There's not anywhere near as many single working, one parent at home families. It doesn't sort of fit in anymore very easily with how things are.
Not serving anybody. No. So what's next? What's next for Robyn Caley? What's coming up? What should we be looking out for?
Well, I'm currently working on a website. I haven't got a website at the moment, but I am working on one so that I can, properly showcase what I'm doing. And I'll use that, I think, as a selling site instead of Etsy in the end, because I'd rather have control of it. I do like to have control of what I'm doing. So, like, for example, all my prints I make at home. I have a printer that I print on. I just feel more comfortable with having kind of the control over it for some reason, like some sort of control freak or something. But yes, so I'd like to do that. So I will be doing a website, but also I am in the process of building up the courage to branch out into doing a more, kind of a different, not different style as such, but moving into maybe using acrylics and doing some more brutalist things and more urban decay kind of topics. So I've got a few places in mind that I really want to draw, like the Mercure Hotel, for example, from the side opposite the Swan, instead of the Swan, awful one with a massive block of flats above it.
That's not pretty.
And the glass bits. I've got my eye on some flats around Bedford that I really want to draw and do in a different style, do in watercolor, in acrylic paint. And so that's something I'm getting ready to start, let's say. I've got the stuff, I've just got to take the step. Probably once I finish the commissions I've got now, I think I'll do that. So those two things. So more a lovely website with everything on it, more pubs and things as usual, but then another side to what I'm doing.
I'm so excited for you, honestly. I just can't wait. I can't wait to see it all develop. And it's been an absolute joy to talk to you today. If you want to go and have a look at some of Robyn's work, certainly at the moment, although that sounds like it's changing, you need to go to robyncaley.illustration. So that's ROBYNCALEY and then .illustration, and that's both on Facebook and on Instagram. And presumably the website. When are we looking for that?
That's a good question. Sorry, the main thing I've got to do. No. Yeah, I'm glad I'm saying these out loud now to people. So I have to do. The main thing that I've got to do is take photos of everything. So I'd say in the next month or two, that should be okay. I'm working on it. It's the photos that are taking the longest because I've got a lot of things and I need to be in the right lighting and things to get the right photos. And then it'll be there.
Is that going to be robyncaley.com, or have you got the URL yet?
I haven't yet. No, I'm pondering it, but I think it probably will be something like that. I think the illustration part's a bit long for it, so yeah.
But that'll be on your Instagram.
That on Instagram is the main place to where I put things. So as soon as that's there, it'll be all over Instagram.
No. So we'll be able to find it. That's brilliant. Huge thanks to Robyn for joining me today. It's been an absolute joy to talk to you. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the pod, and it's been lovely to talk to you. Please like, subscribe, all those good things. It's really, really important. And the feedback that we've been having from our previous episodes has just been fantastic. So thank you to everyone that sent me messages. Until our next wander through this audio gallery of ideas and inspiration, thank you and goodbye.